topic today is going to be, after I describe how we become a socialist nation, I feel that there's a lack of knowledge and understanding of communism. And we keep hearing people talk about the globalists and the insiders, the Bilderbergers, but very little is said about communism, or what used to be called, and still is, the International Criminal Communist Conspiracy. People think that it died with the so-called death of communism back around 1990. But I'm going to show and document that communism never died, that the Soviet Union, even though they don't call it that anymore, that's what it is, the Soviet Union is now stronger and more powerful than ever, while they feign weakness. And KGB operations, GRU operations are on a massive scale, way beyond what they were even back in the days of Senator McCarthy. And I'll be mentioning some things about Senator McCarthy. A lot of people who, they hear about McCarthyism, and but, when I would ask somebody, well, have you ever read McCarthy's books? He had 2 books. One was entitled America's Retreat from Victory. It's got the story about George Catlett Marshall and how he, along with communists in the State Department, sold out the nationalist Chinese in China, the Free Chinese, in such a way that Mao and the communists took over China. And now, because of that, we are in great danger of being attacked by a very powerful nation, economically and militarily, modern China. And also, I don't know if you've heard of this, it's a book entitled New Lies for Old, but the one that's the most important is The Perestroika Deception by Anatoly Golitsyn. And I'll be getting into that and showing how the communists right now, because of the Perestroika Deception and what they call, what do you call it? I got a mental knot. The Russian word that means restructuring, glasnost, no, not glasnost. Anyways, so I want to begin with quickly describing how we have become a socialist nation. And we can go back. First of all, what is the definition of socialism? Socialism is government control and ownership over the means of production and distribution of goods and services. That's what we have. They require a license for about everything you can do, you want to do. And to simplify it, economic control of people by government. And so, let me see here. Bernard Baruch, he was an advisor for FDR in the New Deal, and also he was oversaw the War Productions Board when Woodrow Wilson was president during World War I. And at that time, during the war, the government took complete control of all economic activity. And this is what Baruch had to say. And it's a perfect description of socialism. Every man's life is at the call of the nation, and so must every man's property. We are living today in a highly organized state of socialism. This is 1918. The state is all. The individual is of importance only as he contributes to the welfare of the state. His property is his only as the state does not need it. You look around, we see that. He must hold his life and possessions at the call of the state. And then we go a little further. And matter of fact, I would say here that Baruch would have made a great speechwriter for Hitler, Mussolini, and Stalin. Earl Browder, the head of the Communist Party back in 1966, had this to say: America is getting socialism on the installment plan through the program of the welfare state. There is more real socialism in the United States today than there is in the Soviet Union. Okay. He continues, Americans may not be willing to vote for a program under the name of socialism, but put it under another party label, whether liberal, Republican, or Democrat, and they, by and large, are in favor of the idea. We have no real socialist party, no socialist ideology, but we have a large and growing degree of what 50 years ago would have been recognized as socialism. Then you have 1953, Norman Thomas. He ran for president on the Socialist Party ticket 6 times. And this is what he had to say. Here in America, more measures once praised or denounced as socialist have been adopted than once I should have thought possible short of a socialist victory at the polls. And then in 1957, he said, the United States is making greater strides towards socialism under Eisenhower than even under Roosevelt, particularly in the field of federal spending and welfare legislation. Too many people think that Eisenhower was a great guy because he was the general of the armies in Europe during World War II. But in reality, he was a socialist, if you really look at what he did at the time. Also, let me see here. Next, yeah. In the Harvard Times Republican in 1957, Norman Thomas had this to say, the United States is making greater strides under socialism. Oh, yeah, I already read that one. Okay. Then we come to the Communist Manifesto. There's 10 planks, and it has been stated that if a powerful group could institute the 10-point planks of the Communist Manifesto in a country, they would take complete control of that country economically and politically and socially. The first plank says, abolition of property in land and application of all rents to public purposes. That is, confiscation and ownership of vast areas of land, both for federal and state governments, with remaining private land under multiple restrictions and regulations, so that in effect, you think you own your land and your home, you don't. Then the heavy progressive graduated income tax, we have that. Centralization of credit in the hands of the state, that's the Federal Reserve banks. Free education for all children in public schools. You know, it really bugs me that when you have an institution, public education, that's a communist idea adopted by the Nazis and the fascists and, you know, by us, why would you want to send your children to a public school, a government school, which is, and the curriculum is controlled by the government or the state, and they also determine how it will be spent. When people go to a hearing at a Board of Education meeting, they think that they're really having an effect and so forth. That's not true, because I've learned that when a Board of Education is going to hear the public on a very important issue, and 100 people show up, and they give their opinions, what happens is, without them knowing it, is prior to the public meeting, they hold an executive session, and this happens with city council meetings and so forth, and they already determine who's going to vote how. And so the vote is already decided before they hear from the public. And here's 100 people at a meeting I went to not long ago concerning the, what do you call it, the Common Core. Even though there was 100 people there that didn't want it and were very strong about it, they voted for it. So anyways, that's socialism. Also, the Nazi Party platform, if you read it, I should show you something interesting here. Here we go. This is the Nazi Party platform, parts of it. And see if it doesn't sound like a Republican or a Democrat. Provide work and the means of livelihood for the citizens of the state. We demand an extensive development of provision for old age, you know, Medicare, Social Security, etc. The state must undertake a thorough reconstruction of our national system of education with the aim of giving every capable and industrious citizen the benefits of a higher education. We demand educational facilities for specially gifted children of poor parents at the expense of the state. Gee, you know, I'm just beginning to wonder if secretly Hitler might have been a Republican or a Democrat. I mean, they're saying the same thing. The state must concern itself with raising the standard of the health of the nation. socialized universal health care, Medicare, etc. The party is convinced that our nation can only achieve permanent well-being from within on the principle of placing the common interest before self-interest. In other words, special interest and group rights replace or supersede individual rights. So we see that. I need a drink. Now I want to get into the Communist International Criminal Conspiracy. And, we think everybody's talking about, the globalists and the Bilderbergers and the Council on Foreign Relations, but I'm going to show that's not where the real power is. The real power is in this worldwide international criminal communist conspiracy. I'm going to show they have infiltrated, during World War II especially and after, the communists through the KGB have infiltrated the Council on Foreign Relations, the big banks, the foundations, the military. They've infiltrated, all private and governmental institutions. And so you'll see as I go along how this was brought about. So, 41. Says here, and this is what I'm doing is I've got all this research I put together, and I'm extracting information from various parts of it. Bear in mind that the communist penetration of the U.S. government was not confined to the State Department. On July 30th, 1953, the Senate Internal Security Subcommittee, chaired by Senator William Jenner, released its report on interlocking subversion in government departments. Among its conclusions are, 1, the Soviet International Organization has carried on a successful and important penetration of the United States government, and this penetration has not been fully exposed. The investigations of communist cells and penetration of the government were ended in 1954 when Eisenhower, the so-called Great General, Eisenhower issued an executive order putting off limits the records of government employees from investigative committees, so no more investigations. This penetration has extended from the lowest ranks to top-level policy and operating positions in our government. The agents of this penetration have operated in accordance with a distinct design fashioned by their Soviet superiors. 4, members of this conspiracy helped to get each other into government, helped each other to rise in government, and protected each other from exposure. In 1952, that's end quote, 1952, testimony of former Soviet courier Elizabeth Bentley. I got a book about her whole, she wrote a book about her experience in the Communist Party, and she was a witness in the committees that were investigating communist infiltration, and she fingered who these Soviet agents were that were in the government and the communist cells that they were in. She had identified in the hearings 37 Soviet agents within the U.S. government. The subcommittee also said that, to her knowledge, there were 4 Soviet espionage rings operating within our government, and that only 2 of them have been exposed. In October 1953, a Soviet defector named Colonel Emil Egg estimated that a minimum of 20 spy networks were operating within the United States in 1941 to 42. When he was chief of the 4th section of the Soviet General Staff Intelligence, 34 years after Egg's testimony, these espionage rings and networks still have not been publicly exposed. So you got to ask yourself, if they infiltrated and penetrated that deeply during World War II, and even before, and the hearings have ended, how much progress have they made since then? That's 60 years ago. And believe me, they have made a lot of progress. They are in control of all, communications, different government agencies, the White House, because Obama is a communist. And by the way, I'd like to mention that I don't know if you remember seeing a video on the internet where before the last election, he was in Moscow and he met with Medvedev, who's supposed to be the president of the Soviet Union, but Putin is the real guy. And they were behind the curtain on the stage waiting to, do what they were going to do. But they didn't know the camera was on and the audio was on, the mic was on. And Obama says, I need more time after the elections. I need more time. And, in other words, what they had planned on doing to the country. And Medvedev tapped him on the knee and said, don't worry, we'll give you time. I will talk to Putin. That's a big wake-up call. That tells me, among other things, but that tells me he does have a KGB handler. Because everything he is doing is driving us into a total totalitarian communist state. Actions speak louder than words. Then over here, of the 653 persons called by the McCarthy Committee during that 15-month period, 83 refused to answer questions about communist or espionage activities. On constitutional grounds, their names were made public. On constitutional grounds, and their names were made public. 9 additional witnesses invoked the Fifth Amendment in executive session, but their names were not made public. Some of the 83 were working or had been working for the Army, the Navy, and Government Printing Office, the Treasury Department, the Office of War Information, the Office of Strategic Services, the Veterans Administration, and the United Nations. Others were or had been employed at the Federal Telecommunications Laboratories in New Jersey, the secret radar laboratories of the Army Signal Corps in New Jersey, the General Electric defense plants in Massachusetts and New York. 19 of the 83 included such well-known communist propagandists as James S. Allen, Herbert Aptheker. He was the chief historian and theoretician of the Communist Party. And I met him at one time, and I dealt with him personally. And Earl Browder were summoned because their writings were being carried in U.S. Information Service libraries around the world. Now, that's just scratching the surface. Think about what it's saying here. If that was the case back then, what is it now? And believe me, no member of the Senate or the House would dare to try to expose communist activity, because if they do, they'll be destroyed as McCarthy was. Oh.
Try to get it working here.
Okay. Oh, I see, yeah. Where is it? Okay. Yeah, still trying to get used to this thing. Yeah, get rid of that. There.
Is this PDF document?
Right.
The PDF.
Thanks. This is taken from a document titled Soviet Modes in the CIA. And you'll see where the Soviet KGB operations were such that they have actually taken control, lock, stock, and barrel of the CIA. So, and this, you can see why, I'll get to that later. Let's see, 95, all right. Too many modes to count. Penetration of the CIA is certainly not a new Soviet goal. I should mention that before the CIA was up until 1947, it was called the Office of Strategic Services. The communists found their best opportunity at the CIA was first created during World War II, when the new agency was known as the Office of Strategic Services. Nathaniel Weil, who broke with the Communist Party USA, wrote that, quote, in the Office of Strategic Services, employment of pro-communists was approved at every level, provided that they were suited for specific jobs. As it turned out, the OSS Director, General William Wild Bill Donovan, had systematically recruited his OSS personnel directly from the Communist Party membership. Nor was Donovan shy about admitting this. When confronted by the FBI and with clear evidence of communist agents in the OSS, Donovan boasted, quote, "I know they're communists. That's why I hired them." You never get this in the media, even back then. The public was never told about these things. Then it goes on, when the OSS became the CIA in 1947, the original personnel were largely retained, communists and all. By 1952, CIA Director Walter Bedell Smith publicly confirmed that hidden communist agents were working inside his agency. Since no one in the executive branch seemed to be interested in rooting out these spies, Congress began to take an interest. Joseph McCarthy's subcommittee specifically raised the idea of a formal investigation, as later described by legal advisor Roy Cohn. Can you let me know when there's 15 minutes left, and then when there's 5 minutes left? Wayne? It goes on here. Our desired investigation, one desired investigation that never got started was that of the Central Intelligence Agency, headed by Allen W. Dulles. Even though they never proved he was a communist, because of his actions, which were such that he was supporting and protecting communists in high places, as far as I'm concerned, he was a Soviet agent. Our staff had been accumulating extensive data about its operation, and McCarthy was convinced that an inquiry was overdue. Our files contain allegations gathered from various sources indicating that the CIA had unwittingly, and I don't think it was unwittingly, hired a large number of double agents, individuals who, although working for the CIA, were actually communist agents, Soviet agents, whose mission was to plant inaccurate data. So that creates a lot of confusion. Although we spent far more for intelligence than any other countries, the quality of the information we were receiving was so poor that at times the CIA found what was happening only when it read it in the newspaper. When the news broke out that McCarthy was contemplating an inquiry into the CIA, consternation reigned at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, the White House. Vice President Nixon was assigned the delicate job of blocking it. I can remember everybody thought, back in 1968 when he was running for president, he was a great guy, he's a conservative, and he wasn't. He's the one that opened up the doors for trade with China that has resulted in China becoming, as far as I'm concerned, the world military and economic power, along with Russia. And block it he did. Then there was Anatoly Golitsyn. He was a Soviet agent, I should say, he was in the KGB. And this is way back in the 50s when he was young. And he was promoted into the inner core of they were trying to restructure the KGB so it would be much more effective than it used to be. And so he was in the inner core of the KGB and among a group of people that did not know anything that was going on concerning the KGB and so forth, except this small group, which worked right under Stalin. And in this group, they would plan Soviet activities and strategy and tactics 20, 30, 40 years in advance. And so they act, we react. That's why we're losing. And so he ended up defecting about 1961 or so, came to the United States. He got asylum. And they wanted to take him to, military intelligence or, different agencies of the government. And he kept saying no. The FBI, and finally they asked, why do you insist on the FBI? And he said it's the only agency of the government that has not been infiltrated. And that explains why they hate J. Edgar Hoover to this day and have people thinking he was a homosexual. You go against these people and they will destroy your life. So anyways, he wrote 2 books. One is New Lives for Old. It was published in 1984, and in there, he laid out the plan that the Soviets had, and the plan was that this new perestroika would be a thing that would begin with the liberalization of Czechoslovakia, then the unification of East Germany and West Germany into one country, and then the so-called liberalization of the East European countries, and they would join the European Union. And in effect, what that amounts to is like rolling in a great Trojan horse, because when East Germany was united with West Germany, the secret police of East Germany and the military and so forth and government officials became part of the new German government. So this is where you have an immediate total infiltration and adoption of communist agents within West Germany, Germany. And the same thing with NATO, and I should say the European Union. When the East European countries became part of the European Union, the same thing happened that happened with East Germany becoming part of West Germany. And that's why, as I'll show later, there's a great deal of communist infiltration in the European Parliament and NATO. And so because of this, how should I put it? It's called, when you see NATO and and European Union and the United States putting pressure on Russia, sending military equipment and troops along its border into the Ukraine and so forth, that makes Russia look like, they're in trouble and we're trying to start a war or whatever. But what people don't understand is this perestroika and the KGB long-range plans is to create. What they did was they created controlled opposition. So the whole thing is orchestrated. And by creating constant crises coming out of the Kremlin, orchestrating all of this, they create different crises in such a way that it scares people. And oh my word, we're going to have World War III. So the solution comes when the crisis hits and the economies of Europe and the United States collapse, and I feel that's going to happen very soon. The solution will be, we need a world government. And thank you. Excuse me, you don't have the Soviet symbol up there? Okay. Oh, how many minutes? 10. All right. Boy, there's so much stuff in here. I could go for another 2 hours, but let me see here. I can find. All right, perestroika deception. What is the definition of perestroika deception? The Soviet Union never died, it was restructured or transformed, in other words, made stronger. The Russian term for the above is perestroika. A classic cover-up of facts occurred following Gorbachev's speech kicking off the celebration of the 70th anniversary of the bloody Bolshevik seizure of power on October 7, 1917. He did not sound like he had rejected communist ideas of world conquest when he concluded his 2-hour and 41-minute televised speech, declaring, now listen to this, in October 1917, we parted with the old world. That's the Western world, that's us. Rejecting it once and for all, we are moving toward a new world, the world of communism. We'll never turn off that road. When at the dawn of the 20th century, Vladimir Ilyich Lenin put himself at the head of a close-knit group of comrades and set out to organize a proletarian party, communist, of a new type of Russia. It was this great party of Lenin that roused the nation, its best and most devoted forces, for an assault on the old world. That's us, the Western civilization. The second October Revolution is coming, but this time it's going to be worldwide, and the first phases of it have already begun. Only this time we will be a worldwide communist revolutionary assault on the old world. That is the West and the United States in particular. Let me see here. According to Anatoly Glasnost, perestroika, and the reforms and upheavals we have been witnessing in the former Soviet bloc represent controlled events which form a part of the grand strategy rehearsed and planned decades ago. Okay, all right. If you examine the background of the prominent Russian figures, you will find that they have long Communist Party, KGB, or Komsomol pedigrees. Yet, for some inexplicable reason, the Western media have accepted their sudden orchestrated mass conversion to Western-style norms of behavior, that endless talks of democracy and their acceptance of capitalism as genuine. Scratch these new instant Soviet Democrats, anti-communists, and nationalists who have sprouted out of nowhere, and underneath will be found the secret party members of the KGB. In short, the former Soviet Union and the East European countries as well are all run by people who are steeped in the dialectical modus operandi of Lenin. Without exception, they are all active Leninist revolutionaries working collectively towards the establishment of a world communist government, which by definition will be a world dictatorship. Now we see that, I gotta conclude, but there's so much more. We see that Obama, the Congress, the House, and the Senate, they voted for the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And they also did a fast track that gives Obama the power on his own to put us into not only the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which is the Pacific Union, then you have the North American Union and the Atlantic Union, which is the merger of the United States with the European Union. And I should mention that Gorbachev said about 20 years ago, he said that the European Union is the new European Soviet. Nobody caught on. And so we have a communist in the White House. There's communists around him. I can't remember the name of the congressman or senator, but he said there were about 80 known communists in the House of Representatives. And, of course, you don't know how many others there are. And, you know, how can I put it? So now we've been kind of voted into these regional governments, which will come together in the near future to become under the United Nations, and you have your world government. And as far as I'm concerned, when they voted for that, you know, the House and the Senate, they in effect overthrew the Constitution and ended the sovereignty of the United States. And so there are some rugged days ahead, and I feel, and keep in mind when I say this, it doesn't mean that we should give up and so forth. We should work even harder, because the more people we educate, the better off we'll be when the storm hits, and we'll have enough knowledge and leadership to rebuild our country after the Great War that's coming. And I feel, I could be wrong, but I feel, 90% sure that by no later than the end of 2016, at the end of the year, we will be attacked by Russia and China, but it will be done under the UN banner to come in and restore order and peace, because as we approach that, there will be anarchy and economic chaos. And so I know that we're going to have a cleansing of this country. And when the Lord feels that people have reached a point in this great war that they have repented and they've been humbled, the Lord will intervene with divine intervention. We know that in the War of Independence with George Washington and the Continental Army, there was great miracles that took place. But the miracles that are coming in this great war that's just about upon us, the miracles that would take place will dwarf what happened with George Washington. It's going to be, you know, beyond anything ever seen in history. And so there's a whole new rebirth of freedom coming that will be even greater than what the founding, I put it this way, the founding fathers laid the foundation of our constitutional system. It is for a future generation to build the superstructure. And we are going to rebuild our country and have more freedom than we've ever seen before. And I feel that these people who are here, you people, are very choice spirits. You've been preordained to come here. You're valiant. You were valiant in the war in heaven, and you're valiant now. And the Lord is going to have need for us. And so look forward, not with fear, but with the assurance that in the end we win. And thank you very much. Bye.